when something's, tangible, it's far easier to kind of get the budget sign off when you're delivering a beautiful space. It's not a case of, build it, certify it and walk away. It's now an ongoing situation where data needs to be flowing. That's the same for the majority of accreditations.
Is software part of those conversations now, or is it still a bit of a, why are we talking about software in a construction meeting?
It's a bigger sell to explain the benefit of a system or a piece of technology than it is to deliver a beautiful reception that everyone can see. I think it's a challenge, isn't it?
Well, welcome to The Good, The Bad, The PropTech. I'm delighted today to be joined by Greg Davidson, one of the founders of HollenPlus, a leading consultancy business working in the wonderful world of commercial real estate and construction. And hopefully today we'll explore the impact or not impact as it might be on the world of property technology on the construction. So Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I think for those that might not know anything about what you guys do as a business, I think it'd be a really good thing to kind of kick it off with, I suppose, how you ended up where you are, founding a business, doing it, and probably a little bit more about the stuff that you guys do in your day job.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background's in asset management. So I'm a chartered surveyor working in private equity for the last 15 years, always in the value add space, so very hands-on, CapEx intensive, usually assets that need repositioning in some way. So whether that's, it could be something like lease engineering to improve the WALT, or, more often than not involves CapEx, physical CapEx to reposition the building, drive rents on and improve returns. So my focus has always been on, IRR driven returns, private equity, making, get in and out as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Very typical. But that's really kind of drilled my view on commercial real estate. Within my kind of interest within the property world has always been a sustainability led angle.
Okay.
And I think that's naturally progressed as the years have gone on, to a point where, it got to a point where the reason we set up HollenPlus was when I was client side, we were receiving really uncommercial advice from our teams on projects. So when you're trying to reposition a building, you have when you buy a building, you have a certain amount of CapEx available to then reposition the building. You have got a endless pot of cash to go and spend.
How boring.
Splurge money left, right and centre. You have an amount, and if you need to go over that amount, there's a very difficult conversation with the IC committee and all kinds of issues that arise.
Yeah.
Internally, obviously not very good career-wise if you're going back asking for additional capital.
Every time, especially as well.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you need to avoid that at all costs. There came a point where you're basically obviously leading design teams to try and deliver solutions that meet your budget requirements. But more often than not, we were finding that the teams or certain parts of the team weren't commercially minded. So they would go off and deliver a textbook, response about, okay, let's rip a system out and put a brand new, let's put a brand new VRF system in, and it's £5 million. Whereas in fact, you've only got £500,000 to reposition this particular building or particular floor.
Yeah.
So there was just kind of a lot of wasted time and energy. I think there's probably, good and bad elements of the industry, but we just grew frustrated with the lack of commercial understanding from certain aspects of it. So the idea behind HollenPlus is that we take the asset management commercial side, returns focus, and merge it with decarbonisation, sustainability, and ESG.
Yeah.
So looking at delivering solutions that deliver a financial benefit first and foremost. So there's no point putting things forward unless there's a commercial benefit. That's what we see. You're far more likely to get a sign off at IC board meetings if something can prove there's a commercial benefit, whether that's, drive rents higher, make an asset more liquid, reduce costs, remove running costs. So the really successful solutions do multiple elements of that. So we've set up the business HollenPlus now, essentially finds the solution. So we'll take any given building, listen to the client's brief, and then go and find solutions that meet the brief within the budget, within timescales, with an asset management hat on, minimizing disruption, minimizing costs, maximizing returns. That's the kind of the MO of the business.
Yeah. That's a pretty, I suppose it's an interesting observation that you had kind of firsthand, being like, I'm frustrated by the bit that I thought I made quite clear in the brief, and suddenly you've got I suppose an algorithm or the report says spend £5 million. It's like, did you not hear what I gave you as a brief?
Yeah.
I suppose in doing that, trying to unearth those things that tick those magic boxes of, in budget, increasing rents, liquidity, and reducing costs. What are the types of things that you are seeing more typically hit that mark? Is it solar panels? Is it LED lighting? Is there consistencies, or is it kind of different per project?
There's definitely technology and interventions that work across any asset. So, LED lighting is a classic. Just is low cost, high benefit. There's, reduces running cost, improves, EPC, the journey towards net zero. So that's a very simple intervention. Things like solar panels definitely have a multitude of benefit. I think you start getting into the area where there's always been this argument about, if, for example, you've got a logistics unit, then, I think historically landlords and owners have argued, why should we, the tenant gets the benefit, so why should we put in another £1 million worth of capex day one?
Yeah,
I think that's a slightly oversimplified argument. I think there's so many additional commercial benefits to adopting a more proactive approach from the decarbonisation point of view, especially if you're trying to attract the top 10% of the market. If you're trying to attract the really grade A tenants that looking to move rents on and reposition assets, then they're not going to be signing leases for buildings that don't align with their own corporate principles and policies. So I think it's a very oversimplified argument that why should we invest the extra capital if the tenant's going to be getting the lower cost energy. Solar panels definitely over the last few years the costs have come down massively, so the payback's gone from even 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was 10, 15 years. Now it's down at 3, 4 years. So, that now makes a lot more commercial sense. And there's option, you don't have to necessarily fund the capex day one. There's cost-free options.
Yeah.
So you can normally find a solution that works for both parties on solar, and obviously has knock-on impacts on, decarb, net zero, MEES. So there's a whole host of benefits that the landlord does receive, as well as, yes, the tenant gets some lower cost energy, great. Also means they're more likely to renew at lease end. Also means if they do decide to leave, it's the unit's more lettable, and if you try and sell, then it's more liquid. So it's I think people are coming around to the idea that that's a far oversimplified argument, and the conversation runs a lot deeper than that these days.
So do you find that kind of part of your role is to, I suppose, articulate the value of something that if you look at it in a very narrow field, it can be like, well, it's an obvious no. Whereas actually it's like, well, when you stitch together all these other points of reference of it, it then makes the conversation infinitely easier, because you're like, well, it does more than just give them cheap energy than somewhere else. It's like, well, it would do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Do you still find that's like an educational piece though? Or do you think it's becoming more like, well, of course, it's a no-brainer. Why are we not doing it?
Yeah, I think it's very client dependent. Some clients are, pushing the agenda on and are, really kind of market leading. Others need a bit more hand-holding and a bit of explanation, and maybe they hadn't considered the other commercial benefits that actually doing a certain intervention will lead to. So it's very case by case. But I think, the market in general is becoming more aware of the benefit of doing, certain interventions. But there are certainly clients that are less willing or less understanding in moving it forward and kind of stick to the basics.
Yeah. Well, which, sometimes the basics is better than nothing, I suppose. Yeah. But obviously you reference these things as kind of technologies, right? Which I don't disagree with, like LED lighting and so we would also qualify as like technology. But with regards to kind of the digital side of optimization and software that can do, hardware is always going to have a higher bill than software.
Yeah.
But is software part of those conversations now, or is it still a bit of a, why are we talking about software in a construction meeting?
No, it's a huge part. One of the biggest positive movements you can make, especially if we're talking about, MEES and net zero, alignment and decarbonisation in general, is the demand reduction side, and these energy management software solutions that actively manage demand consumption within the building are, massive steps forward. They can wipe off 20 to 30% of demand, within weeks of installing. So that has if you're looking at the journey towards net zero, that's a massive step forward in a very quick, very short space of time. For generally speaking, they're very, very cost effective. If you're looking at the benefit versus the cost, it's a very low cost, big, high impact intervention that you can make. And you don't, it's not a case of there's no disruption involved. More often than not, it's a software piece going in. There might be some, additional sensors or some additional hardware, but it's not a whole scale rip out BMS.
You're not replacing the facade of the building, right?
Yeah, it's not a 6-7 figure job. It's it's a few £1,000s, and you've got a nice platform, and you can manage the building far more intelligently.
Yeah.
Than you can without it. So it's that's one of the simplest, easiest things, and that applies to most buildings. There's a bit of a size threshold. So buildings under a certain size, say 15,000 square feet, the cost benefit may not be there, but anything above that is
should be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Why do you think that those buildings don't have that stuff in them today? Because everything you've just said, you're obviously preaching to the converted here, but like when you're going in and finding these things, it's low barrier to entry, it's minimal disruption, and could hit, could save you a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like why, in the majority of buildings, why do you think it's like it's not already there? Like what do you see as holding it back?
I think it's a combination of a lack of knowledge about it. I think it's relatively new. It's probably only been around maybe 2, 3, 4 years, especially when you're looking at the kind of the machine learning element of it and the digital twins. That's relatively new.
But I suppose from like, why are they not there is the question of going, is it because the benefit goes to an occupier, therefore the landlord's not incentivized to research it? Yeah. Is it as simple as that to go, well, why am I going to find and implement something that reduces your operating costs?
Yeah, I think that's one of the, on the point we touched on earlier, that's in a single let building, then that would be a valid argument or a valid concern of a landlord. And, it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah.
In a multi-let building, it's a completely different picture. The cost goes through the service charge. So the landlord, assuming there's no voids, the landlord doesn't pay for it. The tenant gets the benefit, but also the landlord, lowers service charge costs. If there's shortfalls due to caps, then it can often bring it below that. And, there are then, and again, a multitude of benefits to installing it. So there are, that completely debunks the whole, we're not going to do it because we're not getting the benefit. So it's a case of, obviously the landlord will need to approve it because it's going into their building, but it's benefit wise, it is for the tenant from the lower energy costs. But then there are knock-on, benefits for the landlord as well.
Yeah, well, and obviously, again, preaching to the converter on it. I suppose, obviously our lens is that we believe that not many landlords know if they do or don't have the system in.
Yeah.
And you might not know that it exists, whether you thought it was 3 years old or 10 years old, it sort of doesn't matter by the by. But in the same way that you talk about like liquidity, reduced voids, increased rents, it's the communication of a building that has those things.
Yeah.
And do you find that when you're going in and, showing someone the value of these things, do you find that there's still a disconnect between, does that make its way onto the brochure or does it not? Like, is it still
there's
a hidden benefit somewhere in the service charge that's not because you might say we've got EPCA, but you probably won't go, we've got a machine algorithm optimizing platform on the brochure. Like, do you think there's that maturity piece?
Yeah. And I think people are kind of, scared of what they don't know as well. So if you start getting overly technical with people, then, can kind of people switch off, and whether that's the asset manager, tenant or whoever. But I think communicating what it is just very simply and what it does very simply and the benefit of it. So, we've got the system in, it saves you 20% a year versus if it wasn't in, and that equates to 50 pence a square foot on your, service charge or something as simple as that. Just so it's communicated in a very clear way that avoids the kind of the technology fear barrier.
The acronym of like, it does this, this, and this is like, I have no idea what any of those things are. I need to go away and Google them. And even then I probably won't know what the hell they are because the Google's throwing me all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Yeah. It's a frustration of ours. And we think that, by being able to compare two buildings, technology stacks together will then allow you to identify if one has it and one doesn't, right? That's from an education perspective, comparing the same things. Sustainability is something that's come under a bit of fire or pressure, I think, from the powers that be or the fund managers, to put it mildly. We looked at the research of kind of interest in Google searches in ESG specifically and saw that it kind of peaked and is now on a downward trajectory, which is probably a bad thing for the planet. But have you seen sentiment change? Is the Google search right, or are you still going into conversations and it's top of the agenda for people?
I certainly wouldn't say it's top of the agenda. I think it's fallen down the agenda in the majority of cases. There are the odd exception, the odd landlords, they're doing it because they see the commercial benefit in it, and the individuals within whichever organization see the commercial benefit, and they're the ideal clients. You're pushing against an open door. You don't need to convince someone that what you're recommending is worthwhile. I think obviously Trump in America, second term, it's completely kiboshed the ESG agenda. So, American lenders have taken, all forms of ESG off the agenda. That trickles down into, global capital. Certainly on the lending banking side, it's taken a back seat. I think, again, there's exceptions that, certain elements of green finance are requesting, different elements. But yeah, it's certainly, launching the business, 3 years ago, just before Trump came in for his second term, not an ideal time.
No.
But
To see those things coincide.
It's a challenge and a hurdle. And again, it's just finding the solutions that clients are interested in. So I think an example would be kind of nice to have ESG accreditations that people were, looking to achieve have definitely taken a back seat. So there's certain buildings. It's more for the whole scale retrofits, refurbishments, new builds that then go for those. So if you're doing a smaller scale refurbishment that may have gone for the, say well accreditation before, they're now taking a back seat, and that budget's been allocated elsewhere. There's, viability pressure across the whole industry. So it's understandable to a degree. On the flip side, BREEAM, plan requirement for almost everything in London now. So that has really kind of ramped up from that point of view. And the new V7 standards coming in, already in place for new builds, and coming in kind of probably Q3, Q4 for refurbishments.
This might be quite a niche question to ask, but what's the idiot's guide to the V7 in BREEAM as far as the major changes, depending on how?
So I think from a technology point of view, we did an analysis of the V7 requirements, and I think basically to get to the top two bandings, so the excellent or the outstanding, your technology opportunities there between kind of 15 and 35 credits, depending on which route you take. So that essentially translates into, if you're trying to go for those top two bands, you need a serious, you need to be ticking as many boxes as possible on the technology front to be aiming for those two standards. And obviously the planning requirement is excellent. So that's going to open a big door in terms of technology.
Yeah, I suppose with the things that galvanize technology deployment and it's staying on the to-do list for people, accreditations has still been the thing that dominates a lot of decisions that go on in building refurbishment projects. So in the rooms of projects you're involved with, who is the person that is often leading that technology element? Because we often say that there's not necessarily a technology expert. You might have MEP, you might have sustainability, you might have a BREEAM assessor. But are you seeing I call it the annoying consultant you didn't know you needed, which is a digital building one. But are you seeing more technology consultants having to come in? Do you predict that will change, or will it stay within the existing group of experts?
I think it's definitely a specialism that's required. I think otherwise you're relying on advice from people that don't understand or know the entire market, and that's something you need. So like you said, it's either someone in the MEP team used a certain technology on a project 2 years ago, or the BREEAM AP can help advise on that. But again, they're not technology specialists. They can advise on, right, you need a certain type of system, but they don't know the dozen systems available and which one's the best value in X, Y, Z. So again, that's where the specialism comes in terms of, it's a big market. You need to know who are the best players, the reliable ones, which ones are about to go bankrupt, because there's a lot of churn in the industry. So
there is a lot of churn.
Avoid this 50%, but let's focus on these three. So that there's definitely value to that. And I haven't personally worked on a project where we have a specific technology consultant yet. But there's definitely, in my opinion, within the next year or two, will be a common site.
As opposed to everyone pointing at each other going, can you, are you going to figure it out? Are you going to, it's like, oh, right, okay, so one of us has got to go. And then I suppose it's sort of, people typically would look backward to go, I have used this before, but the hard thing with innovation and technology is it moves so fast. So, you know, what was good today, by the time you PC in 18 months time or longer, it's like, are they still around? Are they still going? You know, all those fun things which make it difficult.
Like you said, it needs to be factored in and designed in early. So doing a bolt-on there's always compromises if you're trying to do it after, at the end of the process, or, it just never works quite as well as if you designed it in originally. If you're trying to install sensors and taking ceilings down again, and it hadn't been, all you had to do was design it in a, early stage.
Early on,
and then it would have been a far sicker process, and, you're not climbing around damaging ceilings and all sorts doing that. So, It's a massive growth sector, I think, within the kind of construction design team space.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously very glad to hear that on
Yeah.
the basis of what we do. If you're like, no, it's
Yeah.
absolutely irrelevant. Oh God, let's go and find something else again. But I suppose in those things of like navigating through all the different requirements and technologies that come in, do you find that you're having to educate yourself and go out and research and find these things? Is that part of the advice? Because obviously you have strong opinions about solar or LED. Like, are you finding yourself now with the business going out and going to technology events because you feel like you need to upskill yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And each new project, each new client is, no two buildings are the same, even if, identical next to each other on the same business part, they're not the same. So you have to, we treat everything individually. So we never try and, put what works on one building works for this one. We start from scratch on every single project and say, right, let's get in, let's do a full building audit. Let's see what's there now, where it needs to go, and what's the client target, what's the budget. And we work with, we intentionally work with what's there already. So, if even if a client is trying to decarbonize a building, we won't go and tell them to rip out a gas boiler for the sake of it. We'll say, right, well, this has got another 5 or 10 years in. So we work with the natural life cycle of the building. So not everything needs to be done day one. Phase it in around the natural life cycle of the plant of the building. Unless a client wants to do a full-scale refurbishment retrofit, then obviously it's a different story. But generally speaking, 80%, 90% of projects are phased. They work with the natural life cycle of the building. So you'll have a certain tenant leave on that floor. You can then replace, that certain floor with, air source heat pumps and come off, in phases. So I think clients are often scared about the cost of decarbonisation, and it doesn't need to be a scary, huge £10 million number day one. It's phased over a number of years. And obviously, as long as the building, meets MEES requirements, that's the only kind of, legislative position at the minute. Everything else is kind of, a pathway and voluntary at the minute. So as long as it's on the right trajectory, then there's no reason why that approach doesn't work. It can be phased, phase it over 5 or 10 years. Yeah. Make as much of it as recoverable as possible. So, the majority of these works can be put through the service charge anyway. So it's not like a huge capex that needs to be done day one and a big check written in the whole business plan, torn shreds and started again. So it's around kind of, just that's where the asset management piece comes in, and just layering that advice on. So it's not a, scary, career ending conversation with the asset manager. They can then have a slightly more, considered approach and say, right, this is what we need to do over every year for the next 5 years. Then in year 6, we do something slightly bigger with, maybe a plant replacement. And just phase it so it's not a kind of catastrophic, day one figure. Yeah, throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, going, right, it's a massive number. We're just going to do nothing. Yeah. It's actually breaking it out and go, okay, well, here is the low-hanging fruit, for want of a better phrase. Let's start there, and then we can work our way through it. And I think your analogy of that no two buildings the same is something that is painfully annoying, that you kind of expect that two buildings should be the same, but fundamentally how they are operated and managed over the life cycle of a building will change. And that's one of the hardest things of trying to scale technology that we've observed, that you can't just go to vendor X and be like, your product worked really well in this building in Bristol. Go out and across my whole portfolio. It's like, that doesn't work like that, which is a real nice idea. But but it's really frustrating. And I think we certainly see a lot of people chasing that dream of going, once I get in one building, I'll have the whole thing. It's like, well, I think I'll probably sit down and have a look at how this all goes. Do you think there's any merit in trying to be more structured in the framework of things? Obviously, as you go through the advice you're giving to people, you're picking up those success stories of, we tried this and it had this impact, and we tried that and it didn't have that impact. So do you find that that's part of your advice to clients now, to say, look, steer clear of not LEDs, but voltage optimization, because it's actually X, Y, and Z, and this is where we want to put your capital? Or is it still case by case? I think definitely case by case, but I think within a project, clients will often do certain technologies they want to do themselves because they want to test it out for whatever reason. So you can, assess the cost benefit analysis and say, okay, well, this cost £100,000, but the benefit was marginal, and that capital would have been better deployed in a certainly different way. So you certainly pick up on what works and what doesn't, and that's, thankfully, that's not always on our recommendations. That's just something that's been part of the project, the wider project, and say, well, this works, this doesn't, or this combination of things works and this combination doesn't. So There are certainly, obvious things that work across most buildings, and they're, the easy wins, the starting points.
Yeah.
And then everything else is more tailored and more nuanced.
In that example, do you find that landlords are coming, or clients are coming to you with these are the things we want to put into the building? Are they leading the drive of it? Obviously, it's one of my closing questions.
Are they leading the drive? Certain clients will have. I'm just trying to think back to a certain technology. So they might have a different building in a different portfolio. They've said, let's try this in this particular building development. So yeah, there are definitely situations where that occurs, and then it depends on the role, whether it's within our remit to advise if that's a good idea or not.
Okay, that was a very diplomatic answer. I suppose
Yeah.
it's like, are you getting more people coming to you to go, as a business or as a fund or as an asset management team, we want to use this thing and you must make this thing work in this construction project? Or are you still leading the charge to go, you haven't brought up energy optimization, we believe you should do it? So are they more educated than you are as far as driving innovation forward?
There are certainly situations. Yeah, there are certain situations where an institutional owner has tried a technology in their long income fund. Now they want to move it out to the value add fund. So you have to take a look at it. Think, is it a good idea or not? If it's not a good idea, maybe have a quiet word and say, look, we don't think it's a great idea for X, Y, Z reasons. Maybe consider this instead.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a blanket corporate policy and they go ahead with it anyway. That doesn't happen too often, but you can imagine it happening especially across the bigger landlords with hundreds of assets. I think reversing it around is, we would pride ourselves on finding whatever the challenge is, whatever the goal is, and the budget. We will, it's our job to then find the right solution. So, if it's a very niche technology, we don't claim to be experts on every single element of it. So if it's a very specific niche technology that needs to be in there, so we'll go and find the best person to advise on that particular item and, bring them into the design team and make sure that the client gets the best advice. So yeah, we certainly, and that's how we, learn and develop, and, something works on one project and then that potentially be used on future projects for other clients.
Yeah. We call it the PropTech Sweet Shop, which we haven't got a better name for it, which is, here's all the stuff you can put in your building, what things are relevant to you and what can you afford.
Yeah.
And the afford bit, I think, is the part that we're obviously technology enthusiasts, but we know there's a asset management model behind it and a service charge budget that can't take the burden of all these things in there. So we like to say, these are things you can do. Is it right for the business plan to go along with it? Otherwise you can get really exciting design team meeting, and then when you get the cost back 9 months later, go, oh, we're definitely not doing that, which feels like a bit of a wasted endeavor.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, which is a shame for many things. I suppose in the role of the conversations, have a lot of people that occupiers are the ones sometimes demanding these things or expecting them. Do you find there's a need for are occupiers coming and making demands in projects, or are you still building in with the prediction of what they might want? So do you see there's more occupier engagement in construction, or are you still just doing what's right by the client first?
I think with my previous asset management hat on, a key part, what I actually really enjoyed about the asset management role was the interaction with the tenants. So I would purposely make a conscious effort to be in contact with every single tenant within the portfolio on a 3-monthly basis, purely because they're obviously them paying the rent is underpinning the investment value of that property. So if they're not happy for any reason, if they're downsizing, looking to leave, you need to know about that as far as possible in advance to be able to either try and counteract it or make a plan to backfill and resolve. So keeping the tenant happy is obviously the aim of the game at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people lose sight of that. I think a lot of everyone's really busy, but that's such a key fundamental part of the job. It was always one of the first things I would do is make sure that we're, those meetings were in the diary whenever I went to a building, make sure see, a certain percentage of tenants every single time. But they're there every day. You're not there every day. They're there every day. They can give you advice on, what's working, what's not working. You'll often, you'll have a business, within the building that is working with some kind of technology that's, what have you considered using this? Or, something will naturally come up in conversation. So it's always good to listen to the tenants, and they do bring ideas. And we have used, there was a building in Bristol we used to manage, and we brought in an idea that they were using there.
Yeah, amazing. we obviously speculatively build in the UK, which is quite a weird phenomenon for those around the world, that it's like where you sort of hoping that the thing you deliver is right. And your analogy of putting a sensor in one location and then an occupier comes and go, well, actually, I use this sensor, so you can put that one in the bin, sometimes kind of holds back the need to speculatively invest. But then it's that catch-22 of, we're trying to innovate, but we might get it wrong. So how do you cross that chasm of it, which is quite interesting. Well, I think it'd be remiss of me if we didn't talk about the sort of two big buzzwords out there, which is ultimately AI.
Yeah.
In the world and conversations, I don't think we go into a meeting today without someone bringing it up in some way, shape or form.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about the optimization using, algorithms and large language models.
Yeah.
Has AI changed the topic around digital as much as, say, the sustainability accreditations, in your opinion? So the client's desire for data from their buildings, has that changed because of AI, or is it still led by compliance?
I think
it's a big question.
Whether or not it's led by AI, but I think obviously AI is certainly helping deliver what clients need as accreditations get more sophisticated. So, moving the BREEAM, for example, moving to V7, there's a far greater requirement for data backflow. So it's not a case of, build it, certify it and walk away. It's now an ongoing, situation where data needs to be flowing. That's the same for the majority of accreditation. It's not a snapshot in time. It's a two-way thing. Data needs to be collected and monitored. Yeah. So it's a massive benefit, obviously, having AI there to help process that position and, build tools that can manage that. So you're not relying on, human intervention to go and read meters or something as basic and manual as that, which still happens.
It does still happen.
So that obviously allows teams to be, stop wasting time doing something, that can be operated like that, from a manual point of view, it can be automated, and then focusing their time on, the important things, like running the building properly, dealing with tenants,
having tenant meetings, asking if they're okay.
Which is, property management is a very difficult part of the industry, but their time is, they're very thinly stretched across their time. So the time they can spend with tenants is far more valuable than this time they need to be, manually, doing things like that. So there's a huge benefit from that kind of client interaction engagement point of view, which if you're a big fund that's got a huge value, it's hard to put a price on the value of that across your portfolio.
The relationships. Our lens is that AI has kind of stole the marketing created marketing that PropTech never has. And that now people will hopefully have an environment where they're able to automate or query data on their buildings or on their portfolio when they go to ask a question and it's on paper. AI can't get that. So it's sort of, we're hoping that the demand for data will increase, which hopefully will increase the removal of the value engineering. We don't need that software platform. It's like, well, actually, I need this data because it now goes into my, fund level portfolio data point. So but I suppose it's still potentially the accreditations are the catalyst more so at the moment right now than.
I think right now they are. I think there'll be a shift naturally towards smart buildings in terms of, buildings are more sophisticated in how they operate. So, instead of systems being run, the whole building running all the time, there's a demand element to it, which if a building's only half occupied, the classic ones are, on Monday and Friday where the building's only half full, then, we don't need to be running the systems full tilt. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, and only a few buildings, unless you've done a whole scale retrofit or something major or a new build, there's not that many buildings have that at the minute. Quite a few far between. I mean, you'll know percentage-wise better than me, but that's quite a rare thing to have a fully, really, really smart building that really minimizes energy or, really maximizes the tenant experience, through being a properly, I don't know if smart building is the right phrase, but through being connected and censored.
Without obviously planting this with you, that is my definition of a smart building, is that it turns off when no one's there. How you achieve that is complicated and unique, and HVAC, lighting, small power, there's a huge amount of infrastructure in the technology element to deliver it. But if you could write it on a wall, it would be no one's here, turn it off, turn it down, reduce energy, adapt to a building, being on demand, I think is what a smart building should be. Everything else kind of should be the nice fluffy bits around the edges of it. Absolutely. So I'm very glad that we're agreed on that one. And it still blows my mind that we do commission buildings to be 100% on rather than 100% off. It just seems madness pre or post pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is where a lot of these energy guys come and save you money going, let's stop turning the building on a Saturday afternoon. The other one, which again you can say straight back with, is cybersecurity. It's something which I interviewed a conveyancing lawyer who mentioned that she's now including what is the cyber policy in the buildings going forward in their heads of terms negotiations.
Yeah.
Is cyber part of the strategy at the moment, or is it, obviously your focus is on sustainability, but has that crept up the to-do list?
We've definitely seen in heads of terms. It's not something we advise on directly, but it's definitely been in heads of terms, especially for the institutional big clients. Going into a building, then they expect a certain level of specification. So yeah, it's definitely there.
Yeah. So it's something that probably wasn't on the to-do list has now found its way onto it.
Yeah, 5-10 years ago, I don't think that would have been. We're very, very rare, but definitely it's quite a standard thing now.
Yeah. Now everyone's looking around being like, we do have a cyber policy for buildings. Like, I think so. If we don't, we should probably go and find it. Yeah. Obviously, you've been doing this for a little while now, but do you see? Is there any major trends you think that are coming forward that other people might not see, that aren't in the rooms doing the projects, that actually, is there a shift going towards more technology, less technology? Obviously, we've spoken about sustainability already, but is there anything that you think is I'm missing as far as actually, Freddie, the stuff we've spoken about, everyone talks about, but the real things that are changing the game are this, or is it not that simple?
I don't think there's one. I don't think it's one individual thing. I think it's a combination of things. I think as landlords upskill themselves and become more kind of have a greater understanding of what's available, really, it's kind of it's a toolkit, isn't it? So you might have 20, 30 different tools, and it's about selecting the right ones for a given building and at the right time as well. So I don't think it's a single individual thing. It's more a combination of different tools and measures to get to where a client wants to be.
Yeah,
whether that's on a portfolio level or on an individual asset.
Yeah, so there's nothing going on behind the scenes in meetings that we don't know about that we should know about.
No, it's renewables. It's bringing things. It's removing gas, bringing electric. It's reducing demand. It's all. It's not rocket science, and there's nothing kind of hidden about it. It's about selecting the right opportunities for that particular building at that particular time.
Yeah.
Again, that work with returns and budgets. So that's the real kind of skill that we enjoy doing is layering on that asset management approach and just saying, right, you don't need to do that today. Let's do that in 3 years when this particular lease event happens.
Yeah.
So, again, just trying to de-risk and decapitalize a particular project for the owner.
Yeah, I suppose you probably started doing yourself a disservice there, because I would imagine a lot of people don't necessarily get that full list of things.
Yeah.
The list might stop beyond these things are in this report that I've done before about degassing, new HVAC, new facade, where actually if you're able to bring another 5-10 options that aren't in that report that don't cost 5 million quid, then actually they're the bits where it's like, well, now I know that's an option that's way more appealing to me. Yeah. So I think there's an interesting education about the technology side of it that is much less invasive as far as those things go.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think the benefit we have, we can go and, whatever we're looking at, we can go and plug it into the model and into an energy model and say, well, that has this costs, £500,000, has a 2-point score benefit. And then this other option only, costs £100,000, has a 10-point benefit. So we do a lot of cost benefit analysis on the different options available. So yeah, we'll always assess what's available and then kind of work through, strike off, by a process of elimination, what's too expensive, what's too disruptive, and just get to the right answer for that building.
Yeah, but like, this is the right thing for you with your strategy. Let's don't worry about all those other things. We'll come back to that in a few years' time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is very interesting. Well, I think I've got 2 closing questions to ask you. The one I think will be quite easy is, what's the one piece of technology that you wish more people knew about today that they don't know about?
I think it's the one we talked about earlier, is the ARBMS energy management software. It's just such an easy, simple intervention. It's low cost and it saves 10, 20, 30% from most buildings. So that's the one that has, I think, probably the widest appeal in terms of the widest decarbonisation appeal and cost saving appeal. That needs to be put across as many buildings as possible. So I think that's the one that could be rolled out kind of rapidly at scale.
Yeah.
Everything else is slightly more case by case, but that one makes sense in the vast majority of buildings.
Yeah, it's sacrilege in this day and age not to have something that is working behind the scenes to bring your energy down.
Yes, demand reduction piece, isn't it? So there's no point, you can go and change your plant, but then you end up oversizing plants. So reduce the demand in the first place before you start looking at kind of plant replacement.
Yeah, well, the best energy is the energy you don't use, right?
Yeah,
all those things.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I'm kind of without joking about it, but we asked the question of who should be leading the innovation drive. Is it the owners, the operators, or the occupiers?
Yeah.
And I suppose maybe put yourself in there as a consultant. So do you have an opinion on who you think should be leading it?
In an ideal world, it'd be everyone would be fully engaged, but that very, very rarely happens. So I think at the end of the day, the ultimate owner, the landlord, the asset manager who's signing off the check needs to be comfortable that there's a commercial benefits. I think touched on it a few times, but everything we recommend has a commercial angle. So we don't recommend things that don't have a benefit for one or all parties. So there's no point doing something if there's not that benefit there.
Yeah.
Especially there's no point making recommendations that aren't going to get signed off. So as long as you can prove there's a benefit of doing it, then that's kind of the starting point. I mean, within the design team, there needs to be someone kind of championing, the leading the good fight. So where on design teams, that's us. We're appointed on projects. It often falls to. It can range really. It's generally the client leading it, so they need to be engaged and set out. They need to be delivering. What the targets are.
Yeah.
For then the design team to go and put plans in place.
Yeah. Okay. So the short answer is the landlord, the owner should be the ones driving innovation forward because they're writing the checks.
Yeah.
One thing just to touch on is around different investments in buildings. Obviously, you're focused on sustainability and decarbonisation, but there is also the hotelification of specifically commercial office buildings.
Yeah.
And my argument or frustration is, or whinge, is that we often see beautiful new receptions, new meeting rooms, which have a huge amount of costs associated with them that don't necessarily come under the same ROI scrutiny as a technology platform.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you still think there's a funny world where the physical asset of design of something versus the physical doesn't have the same scrutiny as technology does? Or is that,
I think
is that oversimplified from a technology consultant?
I can understand that the point. When something's tangible, it's far easier to kind of get the budget sign off when you're delivering a beautiful space. I think when something's technology is normally hidden in some ways, not normally on display. I think it's harder for people to understand the benefit of it. I think you have to. It's a bigger sell to explain the benefit of a system or a piece of technology than it is to deliver a beautiful reception that everyone can see the commercial benefit of it for. So it's I think it's it's a challenge, isn't it? But it probably makes your life quite difficult.
It does a bit. It's more of when you're fighting against a fixed budget, you kind of know you're watching all these amazing plants or furniture get delivered and you've fought tooth and nail to get mobile access control into a building that costs the same as one of the plants. You're like, I can't believe that, my budget's gone there on that thing, which looks beautiful, but it's a shame that we couldn't have brought down reduced plastic waste or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is, I suppose, is just symptomatic of the industry, and it's one of those things which is great. But look, I really, really appreciate the conversation. I think it's always interesting to talk to people that have been on the asset management side and now in project side to see quite clearly how laser focused you are on providing the options, thinking about it from a financial perspective, and taking people on the journey as opposed to a boilerplate of these are things that you should do and you can do and go and do them. So anyone that advocates for technology is always a big tick in our box, obviously, to see that. And I think it's great that you are fighting the fight of going, every building should be optimized, because otherwise, what on earth are we doing here with all the other stuff that's out there in the market? So, no, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No,
Enjoyed
awesome.
it. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. There you go.
Cheers.